There's a certain kind of stiffness that doesn't scream. It creeps. It lingers. It moves in slowly, like fog across a landscape you used to know. One morning you sit down on the edge of the bed and notice your back doesn't bend the way it once did. It holds. Not painfully, just enough to remind you that something's changed. You go to tie your shoes and find yourself pausing, not because you can't, but because now you must think about it. You shift in the chair. You take the steps a little slower. You reach with hesitation, not because of pain, but because of memory. The memory of what happened the last time your hip caught, or your back flared, or your knees didn't quite catch you. And so you begin to move differently, smaller, stiffer, cautiously, and the body responds. It adapts. It starts to build around that caution. Muscles tighten where they should release. Joints lock down, trying to protect. The spine compresses, not in age alone, but in habit, in reaction, in defense. That's how flexibility is lost. Not all at once, not with one injury, but with 100 micro decisions that say, I'll just avoid that movement today. And day by day, the map of motion shrinks, until one day, you look down at something on the floor, and the first thought isn't how to pick it up, but whether you should even try. It's not just a physical problem, it's an emotional one, because the more the body stiffens, the more distant you feel from yourself. You feel less confident in your step, less spontaneous. You stop walking certain streets, sitting on low benches, riding in certain cars. Not because you can't, but because of what it might cost later. That fear, the quiet fear of discomfort, can become the tightest muscle of all. But here's what matters. You are not broken. You are adaptive. And what stiffness takes away gently, it can also return gently. The body, even at 60, 70, 80, is not done responding, not done stretching, not done remembering how to feel free. You won't move the way you did at 25, but you can feel better than you think. More open, more fluid, more stable, more capable, not through punishment, not through stretching until it hurts, but through a new relationship with movement, one rooted in safety, rhythm, hydration, breath, and trust. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk together through 6 gentle, science-informed ways to bring flexibility back into the back, the hips, the knees, and the everyday motions of living. No pressure, no pain, just practical, nourishing guidance that helps you restore what time, tension, and fear may have slowly taken. And we'll begin in the most unlikely of places, not in motion, but in something even more essential. Before the stretch comes the softening. And for that, we begin with water. Not the kind you drink, but the kind your tissues need in order to move again. Let's begin there, in a language of moisture, memory, and the body's quiet call to loosen. Flexibility isn't only about how far you can reach or how long you can hold the pose. It's about how freely your tissues can slide across one another, how softly your joints can open, how gently your spine can twist. And before any of that can happen, the body needs to be hydrated from within, not just with what you drink, but with how that water moves through the layers of your body. Your muscles aren't the only parts that contract. Wrapped around them, running between them, is a web of tissue called fascia. Think of it as your body's natural silk, delicate yet strong, protective yet adaptable. When this tissue is hydrated and healthy, movement feels fluid. Your back curves without resistance. Your hips swing easily when you walk. You reach behind yourself without that awkward pause. But as we age, and especially when we move less, that fascia begins to dry out. It loses elasticity. It becomes sticky, and movement starts to feel more like friction than flow. This is why the first real step in regaining flexibility is not stretching. It's rehydrating your tissue. And no, that doesn't mean guzzling a gallon of water. It means consistent, rhythmic sipping, especially in the early part of the day. Warm water works best. Add a slice of lemon, a pinch of sea salt, a few drops of mineral concentrate if your doctor allows. The goal isn't just to drink, it's to absorb. But water alone isn't enough. Hydration moves through motion. When you sway, roll your shoulders, rock your pelvis gently while seated. You're sending water deeper into the fascia, encouraging softness where the body once braced. Picture a dried-out sponge. You can't bend it. but soak it slowly, gently, and it begins to give. It begins to fold without tearing. That's your fascia. That's your lower back. That's your knees. They don't need to be forced. They need to be woken up through moisture and movement, small, circular, unhurried gestures that reintroduce glide. Edna, 76, said she used to wake up stiff like a board. Her routine? A glass of warm water at her bedside, followed by 5 minutes of slow swaying. Hips, shoulders, ankles, wrists. It's like oiling the joints, she said. After that, I can actually begin my day. You don't need to break a sweat. You just need to say yes to your tissues. Yes to fluid. Yes to space. Yes to motion that's more about rhythm than range. Once the fascia begins to shift, everything else becomes easier. Your spine unwinds. Your joints begin to feel less like hinges and more like quiet invitations. And from that softened place, the next step becomes possible. Because when the body is hydrated and warmed, it becomes ready, not for force, but for conversation. And that conversation begins with your breath. Not the shallow kind, the deep, cellular kind that helps the nervous system unclench its grip on the places you've been holding tight for too long. Let's go there next. Before a joint opens, before a muscle releases, before your fingers brush the floor or your spine curves into a stretch, the breath has already made the first move. Most stiffness doesn't begin in the body. It begins in the mind's anticipation of discomfort, and the body responds by bracing. We clench not just our jaws or fists, but deep inner tissues that we don't even notice until we try to move. This is where the breath comes in, not as an afterthought, but as the invitation. As the body begins to rehydrate and wake, breath becomes the bridge between tension and release. It is quite literally what tells the nervous system, you're safe now. You can let go. After 60, many people breathe differently than they used to. Shallower, quicker. The breath rises high in the chest and never quite drops into the belly. This subtle shift can make a profound difference, not just in how you feel emotionally, but in how your body opens or doesn't. When you learn to breathe low, slow, and wide, the muscles that support your spine begin to soften. The pelvic floor relaxes. The diaphragm, that great umbrella beneath your ribs, begins to rise and fall with fullness. And as this happens, joints that were once locked down begin to gently respond. Imagine a tightly closed fist. You could pull the fingers open, but they'd resist. Or you could wait until the hand warms, softens, trusts, and the fingers uncurl on their own. That's what happens when you breathe with presence. Not as technique, as trust. Try this. Sit in a chair with your feet flat on the ground. Place one hand on your belly and one on your chest. As you inhale through your nose, invite the breath down, letting your belly rise first. Let the chest follow softly. On the exhale, let it all melt. No pushing, just release. Do this 5 or 6 times. Slowly, then begin to pair the breath with gentle movement. Inhale, lift your arms. Exhale, lower them. Inhale, arch slightly. Exhale, round your back. You're not stretching, you're synchronizing, allowing the body to be moved, not commanded. Howard, 72, once told me he never realized how much he was holding his breath until a physical therapist pointed out. Every time I leaned forward, I'd freeze inside, he said. No wonder my back locked up. He started practicing breath-led motion in the mornings. Now my body moves like it's being invited, not ordered. That invitation changes everything. Because flexibility doesn't come from force. It comes from safety. And safety lives in the nervous system. When your breath is soft, your mind stops bracing. When your mind stops bracing, your muscles begin to lengthen. And only then can your back, your shoulders, your hips begin to reclaim space. So before you twist, before you bend, before you reach, breathe. Not as a task, but as a message. A message that says, this is not a fight. This is a return. And from there, you're ready to move into deeper terrain, into the world of small, spiraling movements that unlock your facial web. Movements that aren't linear, aren't exact, but feel like rediscovering parts of your body you thought had gone quiet. That's where we go next. Not everything that moves needs to move forward. The human body was never designed to operate in straight lines. It curves, it spirals, it rotates, and the older we get, the more we lose not just range, but shape. Movements become linear, predictable, safe. You bend down and come back up. You walk in a straight path. You sit, you stand, you lie flat. But the rotations, the spirals, the quiet shifting that once happened without a second thought, they begin to vanish. Not because the body forgot, but because it wasn't invited to move like that anymore. And that's when flexibility doesn't just shrink. It hardens. It narrows your sense of freedom inside your own skin. This is where the fourth habit enters, not as a stretch, not as a pose, but as a reintroduction to three-dimensional movement. Gentle, circular motions that coax the fascia to melt, that invite the nervous system to participate, that awaken the joints not with pressure, but with curiosity. Imagine your spine not as a rod to straighten, but as a ribbon to ripple. Imagine your hips not as hinges, but as bowls you softly rotate. Imagine your shoulders circling back, not in exercise, but in exploration. That's the practice. You sit, you breathe, and you begin to move in small, intuitive spirals. Pelvis swaying like a tide, ribs sliding side to side, neck releasing into figure eights. Not forcing, not performing, just loosening, reclaiming. When you move this way, something inside begins to remember how to flow. The body doesn't resist, it listens. And in that listening, the fascia begins to hydrate. The joints begin to realign, and what once felt locked starts to soften. Dennis, 70, told me he used to feel like his back was made of metal in the mornings. A physical therapist encouraged him to stop stretching in a straight line and instead begin with slow hip circles and spinal waves while seated. It felt odd at first, he said, but after a week, I could bend again, without fear, without holding my breath. That's the key. These movements aren't about athleticism. They're about restoring dialogue with your own body, reminding it that it's allowed to be soft, to twist, to sway, that you're not a collection of joints and bones to be aligned, but a system of patterns that can still evolve. And once that softness returns, once those spirals begin to flow, you no longer feel like you're holding your body together. You begin to feel like you're being held by it, supported, fluid, home again. And from that place, not of tension, but of restored relationship, there's one more layer to explore. Something many forget when they think about flexibility, the quiet importance of weight, of grounding, of allowing the body to meet the floor and release what it no longer needs to hold. That's where we'll go, not with effort, but with gravity. The moment your body stops trying to perform, and instead simply lets go. Most people think of stretching as effort, pushing, pulling, leaning deeper. But real length, real space in the joints and spine often appears not when you reach, but when you release. And the most powerful way to access that release is through gravity. This fifth practice has nothing to do with being strong or fit. It has to do with being willing to lie down, to yield to the floor, to let the ground hold you. Because when you do, when you stop bracing, stop managing, stop organizing your posture, the body begins to settle. The spine lengthens without pulling. The hips open without force. The shoulders drop into the earth, and with them, so do your expectations. What was tense starts to soften, not because you told it to, but because you stopped interrupting it. You could try this anywhere. A folded blanket under the knees, a small pillow under the head. Lie flat and breathe. Let your feet fall outward. Let your jaw be unguarded. No music, no distractions, just the floor and your breath and the quiet awareness of where your body feels heavy and where it still tries to hold. And then, without doing anything at all, wait. Let time pass. Let your nervous system come down from its ledge. 10 minutes, maybe 15. That's enough for the mind to stop negotiating with the body and for the body to begin remembering that it's allowed to rest. Marilyn, 74, had struggled with hip tightness for years. I tried to stretch it out, she told me, but it always snapped back the next day. Her physical therapist suggested she stop trying to stretch and instead start practicing what's called constructive rest. It felt like nothing at first, but then something shifted. The pain stopped arriving in the morning. I didn't fix my hip. I stopped arguing with it. That was her turning point. Because flexibility, especially after 60, isn't only about muscles. It's about safety. It's about signaling to your system, I am not in danger. I don't need to grip. I don't need to guard. And the ground, quiet as it is, can become the most healing place you visit all day. It holds what you let go of. And in doing so, it gives you back what stiffness has taken: ease, comfort, and the ability to rise again without resistance. And when you rise, something new enters. The desire not just to move, but to move forward. Not just to bend, but to walk. To carry your body into daily life with a little more trust in each step. And that brings us to the sixth and final piece. Not about what happens on the mat or the floor, but what happens in motion, in the transitions, in the flow of ordinary living, where flexibility matters most. The goal was never to touch your toes. It was never to twist like a dancer or move like you did 20 years ago. The goal is simpler and far more profound. To move through the day without hesitation. To get up from a chair without bracing. To bend to tie your shoes without negotiating. To walk across a room without thinking about every step. That's real flexibility. The kind that doesn't just show up in exercises, but in the spaces between them. Because if flexibility doesn't follow you off the mat, what good is it? You don't live on a yoga block. You live in a world of thresholds, kitchen counters, bathroom mirrors, stairs, rugs, couches. That's why the sixth and final habit isn't about new movements. It's about transforming everyday ones. The way you stand, the way you step, the way you sit down and rise again. These are your real exercises. And the more intentional they become, the more your body starts to respond. Not with tension, but with cooperation. It starts with noticing. Where do you hold your breath when you get up from a chair? Where do you clench when you load the dishwasher? Where do your shoulders rise without you realizing it? You begin to move slower, not out of fragility, but out of awareness. You plant your feet before standing. You hinge from the hips. You soften your knees. You engage your breath. These details, small as they seem, begin to retrain your system. And suddenly, walking through the house becomes an act of alignment. Not forced, not perfect, but thoughtful. Embodied. Real. Joseph, 77, once told me that his biggest breakthrough didn't come during stretching. It came while brushing his teeth. I stopped locking my knees. I shifted my weight side to side. I started moving even when I wasn't exercising. That's when I felt the difference. His stiffness began to fade, not in workouts, but in the living room, on the way to bed, in the ordinary. And that's what it means to truly restore flexibility after 60. Not to return to some past version of yourself, but to become more at home in your body now. To stop fearing motion, to stop negotiating with pain, to stop shrinking your days to match your joints. You're still here, still capable, and your body, for all its changes, is still listening. So let's look back. You began by softening, not stretching, inviting water back into the tissues that had gone dry. Then you learned to breathe again, to unlock movement from the inside out. You circled, spiraled, remembered shape. You laid yourself down and let gravity hold what you'd carried for too long. And now you rise into your life with steadiness, rhythm, and trust. Not everything will feel perfect. Some days will be stiffer than others. But stiffness is not your identity. It's just a signal. And now you know how to respond, not with fear, but with movement, with kindness, with presence. Thank you for being here. If any part of this helped you feel more connected to your body, let us know in the comments. What's one motion you'd like to feel free in again? Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us next time as we keep walking gently towards strength, one breath, one step, and one soft stretch at a time.